I think you're an atheist.
Okay, well, that makes no sense.
You're making the best case argument for atheism I've ever heard.
How?
That God is what we experience in the universe is what we would describe as God. It is the definition of everything atheists have ever argued to me.
I'm not even making arguments to you right now. All I'm doing is expressing to you
God
that
is not all powerful.
No, the opposite.
You said God can't create a boulder he cannot lift.
No, because
every single priest
do you know what
and theologian I've talked to has said the opposite.
Yeah, no, none of them. Their dogma literally would prevent them from defying the nature of God. Not a single theologian on planet Earth who's a priest has ever said to you, Tim, God could create a God more powerful than him. That never happened.
No, they said
it's not possible.
So my question is for Andrew, and hopefully I can at least partially satiate your desire to argue. So this is kind of going back to when you were here with Tim last time, and you were talking about the existence or not of rights.
Yes.
And so a friend of mine who is also a fan of yours, who showed me some of your videos. So the first one was your conversation with Dave Smith. We've kind of had a prolonged conversation about the existence of rights, him taking more of your perspective, I'm disagreeing. And then we were both kind of interested to see what you would say with this. So
we'll start with what a right is.
Yes. Okay. So I'm totally down to agree with you that a right is an entitlement without duty.
Okay.
And then my perspective would be that the existence of the obligations that we can both exist necessarily creates rights. And we both agree that you have an obligation not me. I have an obligation to not you. You have an obligation to wherever you're speaking to me, speak the truth, not lie. I don't. Same obligation.
Like you've already made supposed axioms that I don't agree with. You've already created suppositions that I don't agree with. So where does the obligation that I don't you come from?
No, do we not agree that God gives an obligation to both of us? No, I didn't say. I said.
Yeah. Then.
Wait, you have a right to not someone?
No, he's saying he said there's an obligation not to.
Yeah, but
where's this obligation to not do a thing?
Oh yeah, I would say Exodus.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying you're looking at through the prism of Christian ethics.
Oh yeah, both of us, we all come from the same perspective.
I see. So
all the Christian fundamentals, we might have minor doctrinal differences, but I'm totally good to agree with you on all the Christian fundamental presuppositions. So so I'm not disagreeing on that point. My point being that when God goes and gives you an obligation to not murder me, and me an obligation to not murder you,
a duty.
Yes, sure. Duties. You have a duty to not murder me. I have a duty to not murder you, and so on, and and similar other things like you to not lie to me to not lie to you. These things, these create rights, just by the instantiation of the obligation or by the duty.
That's okay. If you were to put this in a syllogism, that wouldn't actually make any sense, right?
Duties aren't rights, right?
Just because you say, if you say you have a duty, you were given a duty to not or me, that does not then instantiate that you have a right to not be by me. That's where you're making a fundamental mistake. Where does that right come from?
Yeah, so this is where
I have the obligation, but you don't have any right.
They only have the right to defend themselves.
Don't even have a right to do that.
Well, shit,
you can defend yourself, or does it become a right? So the thing is where does the duty form into the right process? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's that you basically can't have one without the other.
How? Why not?
So I would say, well, I guess I would start with, I have then an entitlement to not be, and we could go and look at particulars of biblical.
But I'll just say this. It sounds to me like you're not a Christian. The argument you're proposing is that Christianity is subjective and only partial. Therefore, the right cannot exist because God's law, God's word, is not mandate for all.
Right? Are you asking me?
Yeah. That's what I hear from you.
Oh no! The opposite. I'm saying that God is giving you a sequence of duties, not any way any rights.
When God says, "Thou shalt not,"
that's a duty.
The presumption is that we, under God's law, are protected from being.
Nope. Where's that presumption?
I don't know if
the presumption is that God has ordered you not to.
Yeah, that's right. God has ordered me not to kill you.
Right. So there's.
Why does that suppose
my entitlement
that you're entitled to not get?
Because God told you not to do it.
No, God told. Okay, that makes no sense.
How
does it? How does it follow? You'd have to
literally. God says you can't do it.
Hang on. You'd have to demonstrate how it follows. If God says I cannot do a thing, that means you have a right to a thing.
Yes.
Thou shalt not buy a house, but you have a right to.
You have free will. You can violate God's law all you want if you're not a Christian, which is the argument you're making. People who are not Christians will violate God's law, God's word.
Well,
so then it's not a right.
There, I would even go. I would even go one
the
further
presumption
than
that
Tim.
I don't understand what you're trying to say. That rights are things that are impossible to happen in the real world.
No, I'm saying that a right is a
entitlement
absent a duty. And I'm saying that the things that...
So if you are a Christian, you can't...
Yeah, that's a duty. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree that Christians have duties. What I don't agree with is that Christians have rights. So there's no real right to life. You could die at birth, right? You don't really have a right to do this. And also, God's nature can't be contrary.
You think babies don't have a right to life?
Well, hang on. I'll explain. God's nature can't be contrary. You agree with that, right?
Elaborate what you mean by that.
So God
can't contradict himself?
Yeah, he can't make a God more powerful than him?
I disagree with it.
What?
So you're talking about, good God create a stone so heavy he himself cannot lift it. God can do anything.
That's incoherent.
It's not. Logic only exists within the confines of God's word. God's word is beyond your comprehension.
No, logic is a transcendental category. And since it's a transcendental category, we know it exists even though it's not physical. But all things bind by it. Part of God's nature has
Jesus
to...
God?
Yes.
Would Jesus be able to lift a 5-ton boulder?
Yeah.
Then
there's no contradiction there.
So certainly Jesus did perform miracles.
But there's no contradictions with those. So those follow the lines of logic. God's nature still has to be logical because it's part of his nature. His ontology is logic.
So my point is,
you're saying God can make a burrito that's so big you can't eat it?
Of course.
What? That's incoherent.
It's literally not.
It is. That's literally the definition of incoherence. It's totally incoherent.
Literally not. I'm going to explain.
How is it not? Okay, go ahead.
So I can use an example like programming, for instance.
Okay.
I can program a video game in which I have absolute authority over the whole thing. I can change the rules at any moment. Mm-hmm. Within the confines of this game, I can create a rock that my avatar cannot move.
Sure.
I can program it so that my mouse can't move it until I go into the BIOS.
And you both program the video game and not program the video game?
Yes. What do you mean?
What? So you can make a video game that you never made.
What are you trying to say?
Can you make a video game that you never made?
What? What do you mean? I've made
that's direct
I literally can
contradiction.
only make games I've never made. I don't make the same game twice.
No. And you both make a game while at the same time you're not making the game.
But I don't understand.
Can the game exist and at the same time not exist?
There is a reality where yes, quite literally, it's called the paradox. Paradoxes are things that exist within the confines of our logical.
No, that's
reality.
a contradiction. A paradox is different than a contradiction. Tim, you cannot both be me and you. You can only be you.
You don't know that.
Well, yeah, I do, because it would violate the law of non-contradiction.
So this is where I feel like you're running into a problem. You think you know God.
No, I only understand that God has to have a nature, an ontological nature.
And you don't. And what you think you know of God
tells us his nature.
Looking through a keyhole through a 800-bedroom mansion.
This is based on what God tells us his nature is.
Yes, and God can't. You can't comprehend higher dimensions. It's physically impossible.
This is an energy. What you're talking about is what's called an essence energy distinction. I agree with you that I can only participate in the energy of God. But I cannot understand the essence of God. That I agree with.
I don't think you're a Christian.
Okay.
You
what?
There's a simple question.
This is Catholic dogma, Tim. I don't think you're a Christian because you're disagreeing with me on the nature of the.
Can God create a boulder so heavy that he himself cannot lift it?
No.
God exists outside of the confines of this logic in which you think you exist. God is so far beyond you, you cannot comprehend this. To ask if God can lift a rock is asking like, it's a stupid question because we are one tetragillionth of the universe, and you are presupposing God lives in your rules. That is reductivist, earthly, one-dimensional thinking.
Yeah. So you're saying there's universes where there could be contradictions?
I'm saying
could I interject here with a question on the nature of God for Tim? Tim, do you think that God could be, instead of a supreme good, supreme evil?
I don't know that there is such a distinction. God, as the creator of all things, is not going to be good nor evil.
What?
I'm not a Christian.
But I mean, it would. Okay, so
Well, no. I'm not.
So the thing is like what you're saying, what you just said is, I understand the nature of God.
No,
I understand that this being who lives in this different dimension that I could never fathom.
I'm saying God
could neither be evil nor good. That's you making a declaration that you understand the nature of God.
No, it's that I would not describe God as good or evil because God exists outside the confines of human comprehension.
Okay.
To
can exist in contradiction?
Because contradiction exists only within our reality.
No.
You cannot comprehend what exists outside of the
literally, the laws of logic do not actually exist physically in our reality. They're transcendental. They're transcendental categories. They govern our reality.
I don't think you're
exist.
Christian.
Okay, what? Well, this is all.
You're saying
this is
God
all Christian
has
dogma.
to follow these rules. Period.
No, I'm saying that God has a nature like Tim has a nature. Like, for instance, okay, your nature as Tim, the things that make up you. You have a heart and you have lungs and you have things like this, and your heart and your lungs and things like this do work inside of your body that assist your body in moving and functioning and this and that. They're part of what you are. To take all of those things out would change who you are. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is the same thing with God. We're just saying that there's a part of God's nature which he has shared with us as part of his nature, as the Logos. The Logos, part of it is logic.
Only part.
Yeah, but that would mean that part of God's nature is to not violate logic.
Did God create this universe, or is this universe just a function of God?
God created the universe.
So God could change the rules?
Well, no, that would be illogical.
God could not change the rules of the universe.
No, it would go contrary to. So it's like what you're asking me is this: what would it be like if fire wasn't hot? Well, now we've changed the fundamental reality of what fire is.
So I'll simplify it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe our reality, first of all, what we think we know in science, there are higher dimensions we can't perceive. This implies, as most scientific discoveries in the last 130 years, if we choose to believe them, for instance, the electromagnetic spectrum, humans, or air is my favorite example. Humans did not know that air existed because they couldn't perceive it until there was this guy who was showering who realized that there is matter in and all around us. There have been numerous instances where humans realize that things we can't perceive exists. Mm-hmm. And that is indicative of humans don't know nearly enough about the universe, and that we do know. The discovery of the charged electromagnetic spectrum revolutionized human thought because we didn't realize that what we touch, smell, see, and hear as reality is less than a millionth or a billionth of what reality actually is.
Or a trillionth or a zillionth. Who knows? Yeah.
And not understanding dark matter, we are a speck in a massive universe on the ass of a mosquito relative to what God is or could be. Humans saying, I know the nature of God is arrogance that defies the idea of what we know we are limited in thinking. That is, the average person thinks infinity is a number.
Yeah, but that makes
go to the average person.
That makes no sense because all the things that you're saying right now and attributes are trying to define the nature of God, even though you don't think you are. If you're saying, so for instance, if you say
want to put God in a box, I'm saying God.
No, it's the opposite. So if you say God is so complex you can't understand it, you have actually given me criteria for the nature of God. If you say God is timeless,
the lack of knowledge.
Yeah, if you say God is timeless, you've given me criteria for the nature of God. If you say God exists in the 19th dimension, you have now expressed the nature of God. So what we're doing is the same exact thing. I'm expressing to you the biblical nature of God. What God expresses to us is part of his nature.
You're making an atheist argument to me.
It's not atheist.
So
it's the opposite. It's dogma.
Atheists are the ones who argue to me that the universe is mathematical, logical, cold, and it is what it is. It is functions as such.
No, they're physicalists.
And Einsteinian God, which is an atheist view, is the view that God is a God of science and that exists as some form of the universe. And then my view of God is that God exists beyond, and that our concepts of physics are just components of what God has created, and God is likely beyond our own perception and comprehension.
But you've said a bunch of things here that have entailments. God creates.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that for sure, right?
And in science, nothing can be created.
So if God creates and God was the first thing, then that means God was uncreated.
Yes.
Yeah, so if God was uncreated and God created, now we know something about the nature of God.
Certainly.
Yeah, so this is my whole point. And so we could say the same thing, right? Same thing here.
I think you're an atheist.
Okay, well, that makes no sense.
You're making the best case argument for atheism I've ever heard.
How?
that God is what we experience in the universe is what we would describe as God is. It is the definition of everything atheists have ever argued to me.
I'm not even making arguments to you right now. All I'm doing is expressing to you
God
that
is not all powerful.
No, the opposite.
You said God can't create a boulder he cannot lift.
No, because
every single priest
do you know what,
and theologian I've talked to has said the opposite.
No, none of them. Their dogma literally would prevent them from defying the nature of God. Not a single theologian on planet Earth who's a priest has ever said to you, Tim, God could create a God more powerful than him. That never happened.
No, they said
it's not possible.
To claim to understand the power of God is arrogance to assert that you know what God
I'm not saying what
do.
the power of God is. I don't know exactly what the limits of all powerful are.
No, you're saying this reality is a part of God and is what it is, and it's uncontradictory and unchanging.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that the laws of logic, right? The law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle are part of the nature of God. We know this because this is how God created everything and how God expressed to us he creates. So if that is the case, we can understand that that's part of God's nature. He will not defy his nature because it's his nature. Will not defy.
The nature of God as you described it is the universe.
No, it's not the universe. The universe had a creator.
Yes, and
that creator had to be uncreated.
And the universe is a part of God.
No, that's a Gnostic belief.
That's what you just said.
No, I didn't say that. At all.
You said
it's a Gnostic belief to believe that everything
logos
is
of the
parts
universe,
of
the
God.
logic is a part of God.
No. Logic is part of God's nature. You're saying that because the universe is also governed by logical rules, that means that it's part of God. That doesn't even follow.
You said that.
No, the opposite. I'm saying the opposite of that.
So God is illogical.
No, that doesn't even make sense either. What you're saying, all these things you say, they don't follow from one another. So you have to back up to the beginning.
Yeah, so you said the logos, God, the logic, God is non-contradictory.
Yeah.
What God cannot create a boulder that he himself cannot lift.
Yeah,
that is illogical.
no, because it's against his nature.
What does that mean?
It means that you can't do things which defy your nature because otherwise you wouldn't be you.
So explain his nature.
I just did. Part of his nature is the logos and the law of logic. That's part of his nature.
That cannot be changed.
Yeah, I suppose God could change his nature, but why you can't change your nature? You wouldn't change your nature.
God can't change his nature.
You wouldn't change your nature. That's the right way to phrase it. You wouldn't change your nature.
Or can he not?
Could he?
Yes.
I don't know, but I don't think it matters because your nature is what matters.
So you agree with me?
No, I don't agree with you. What you're saying is antithetical to actual dogma.
No, the beginning of the conversation was me saying that God could change the rules as he's created them, and you said he could not.
No, because the entailment of could is a violation of nature. So if it's a violation of nature and you wouldn't, you might as well say couldn't.
That's not an argument to what I just said.
It is an argument. If I can't make Tim not be Tim because Tim has a nature. Could Tim, if I gave Tim a different nature, do a different thing than his nature? Yeah, sure.
So
what does that have to do with anything?
You think God is limited in his capability?
Well, you would have to tell me how that's limited.
God cannot affect the rules of his universe in a way that would defy your view of logic.
And if he wouldn't, then he couldn't because he wouldn't.
That is not an argument.
Well, not only is it an argument, but Tim,
you are literally saying nothing.
Tim, you couldn't fly, right? Whether or not you would fly, okay, or could fly. If you wouldn't fly, you couldn't fly, right?
You're not saying anything.
Bro, what am I not saying?
Can God do things
that are outside the violation of his nature? He won't do them, no.
What is his nature?
Part of his nature would be logic.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is there is a logical structure to God that he cannot change.
No. Could change. When you say
would not.
When you say potentiality for could, right? It's irrelevant to the view of will not.
He can do it. He doesn't want to do it.
Possible. I don't know because I don't understand the limitation of all powerful.
Which was my first point.
Yeah, but it just doesn't matter.
To assert that God could not do a thing because you can't
wouldn't.
understand it.
Yeah, because wouldn't here is what we're focusing on.
So how do you know that God wouldn't do a thing?
Because he told us.
What did he say?
Inside the Bible, he's
specifically.
He's very descriptive about his nature and how he operates.
Tell me what he said.
We'd have to pull up the Bible so we could go over it.
Go over it? But which part of the Bible?
Well, we would have to start with Genesis and then go through the entire ontological nature expressed through the Trinity.
So you don't know?
Yeah, I do know. So, like, God is the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. We know that, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this would infer timelessness?
I suppose, right?
Yeah, if you're both the beginning and the end?
I don't know that
if you're both those things at the same time, then time can't apply to you, right?
Not necessarily.
How could time apply to you if you're the beginning of it and the end of it?
If it has a beginning and as an end, it has time.
No, not if you're the beginning and the end at the same time.
Is that what it says?
Yeah. If you are the beginning and the end.
My point is, I do not believe that it is possible for a human to understand the true nature of God.
Neither do we. And
that the assertion that God could not do a thing implies knowledge of God beyond the comprehension.
Would not do a thing.
But that makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It's a basic ontological argument. The idea that you will not go beyond the confines of your nature, whether you could or not, has no bearing on anything.
Right. So if God can't do a thing, He's not all powerful.
It's not can't. You keep on using the word can't.
God
would.
If I could interject here with an example, and this is why I asked the question about God being the ultimate good or ultimate evil. One example that I would give is God cannot be the ultimate evil. Kind of for what Andrew would say is this is a logical contradiction, because if God was the ultimate evil, then that would mean He is ultimately He's the maximal being in all sorts of negative attributes. One of them being selfishness, another one being anger. Selfishness to the point of wanting to be the only being in existence, but anger to the point of wanting other beings to exist to torment them arbitrarily.
Why does anger exist?
Why does anger exist?
Yes.
It's just a non sequitur. It has nothing to do with his argument.
He just said
it's an attribute.
Right. He's explaining that God can't be angry. So I'm asking, what is anger? Why does it exist?
No.
He didn't say that.
That's not what I said. What I said is God cannot be the ultimate evil. Because to be the ultimate evil,
you would have to be the anger,
you would have to be the maximal being in certain negative attributes that are going to conflict with each other.
Like what?
So imagine so like you're a comic book guy. So imagine that you had the ultimate Red Lantern meshed with the ultimate Orange Lantern. Those two character traits conflict with each other.
This is a bad example because you know about the White Lantern Corps?
Yeah, I'm not saying that comic books are coherent logically. I'm saying you have two character traits
as
the maximal being in both of these attributes cannot simultaneously exist.
It's a bad example because the White Lantern Corps is the merger of all the attributes into one. They all simultaneously coexist.
Guys, our Discord preacher, he wrote down, his name is like Malachi 36. His name, I don't know his name, Malachi 36. Malachi, thank you. Mm-hmm. For I am the Lord, I don't read the Bible. For I am the Lord, I do not change. Therefore, you are not consumed. Zero sons of Jacob.
Do not change. That's part of his nature.
And so the question
How's that do with the right to life that we started out with?
Do we know 100?
That is a great question.
Do we know God so absolutely that we can perceive Him in full?
No, not it.
No, but we can know particular traits. So, for example, Jesus in John 14 says that He is the way, the truth, and the life.
Agreed.
So this is saying that Jesus as God is the ultimate being in a positive attribute, that being truth.
If we can't conceive of God in His entirety, then we can't know everything other than what knowledge was bestowed upon us.
Yeah, but that's a knowledge claim, which presupposes God to begin with, because it's a knowledge claim.
God told us what He is, and through the Bible.
Mm-hmm. That's part of Revelation, yeah.
And that's a Christian view. I'm not a Christian.
But how's it do with right?
Wait a second. Whether you're a Christian or not,
I don't get it.
It would still have to be your view that God reveals Himself to you somehow. That would be some form of revelation.
Indeed. I believe that we have the capability to observe that God exists through math, science, and observation.
Yeah, but why are those attributes of God?
Which ones?
Are those attributes of God? Math, science.
I would say the mathematics part is just the logic.
I would say, simply put, outside of doctrine, you can look at the universe and then calculate based on the rules that there is a creator.
Yeah, it's just the watchmaker argument. So you just say, well, if you were a person who had no understanding of technology, but you found a watch on a beach and you picked it up,
that's literally
you would infer creation just by the way that the watch operates. It's the same argument.
It is literally not.
Yeah, or you can say that mathematically, if you changed even one little teeny tiny thing, the entire universe would be thrown into disarray. What's the argument?
The argument is that there is negative entropy, and there is entropy, and that entropy only exists in greater elements of entropy. And what we end up finding throughout the universe, again, assuming you trust modern science, is that energy coalesces and disperses. I would say at a rate similar to the golden ratio. So it's a gradual.
And if you threw that off, it would throw everything into disarray.
Not what I'm talking about. So when you take a look at the basis components of the universe, in some degree they coalesce. So we can take a look at quarks, atoms, denser hydrogen becoming helium, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that so long as there is more entropy outputted from a system, ectropy is possible. This scales up exponentially and mathematically, which is what humans have traced so far. Again, if you believe modern science, because there's a lot we don't know. And you find that everything skews towards the creation of higher complex systems, so long as they create more disorder in the creation of complex systems. What that ultimately leads to is, simply put, atoms become elements, become compounds, become molecules, all finding other ways to interact, become increasingly more complicated and organizing free energy in the universe into a complex system. This is a fact.
I'm not sure how this isn't like an explanation or descriptor of the observation of revelation of God for you.
So what we see is that once you get to the point of self-replicating proteins, molecules come to a point where, and this is a gap for human knowledge, we don't know why at some point molecules will become self-replicating proteins. I don't think it's all that complicated because the question of why elements become compounds is the same thing. We don't care. Oxygen bonds with carbon, to oxygen, carbon dioxide. These things occur, and we can track the science of them. At a certain point, self-replicating proteins emerge if the chemical conditions are correct. Self-replicating proteins eventually become single-cell life. Single-cell life eventually becomes multicellular life. Within those complex systems, multicellular life eventually creates ecosystems. Now they're creating complex systems outside of physical energy and into abstract concepts, which only exist in our thoughts. Eventually, you'll end up with multicellular organisms.
But your thoughts do exist, you think?
To some degree, they do, because I think, therefore, I am.
Yeah, where do they exist, though?
That's the interesting question that humans don't really know, because this is the abstract, complex dynamic system created by the highest iteration of life as we know it, which is ourselves, unless there is an imperceivable higher form of life, which all mathematics predicts does exist. And so what we end up seeing with the universe is first you get chemicals that coalesce, you get organisms that reproduce, all of it collecting free energy and organizing into more complicated systems. Eventually you get a squirrel. Squirrel's a random example. But squirrels create more than just themselves by collecting free energy. They eat food, they make babies. That's replication.
What I don't
Squirrels
understand,
create ecosystems.
I actually don't understand right now, though.
Squirrels
I understand what
are planting nuts, which create trees.
Yeah.
A new abstract system emerges, a complex system between life that is beyond just a physical component. It is now including a physical component, but it has an abstract element to it, interactions between two objects. That accentuates further into the manipulation of an environment, which a lower life form would probably be a beaver.
Yeah, but how is any of this? What I don't understand, right, is those systems you just described, you've observed.
So beavers,
those you've observed,
start manipulating their environments and creating complex systems outside of life itself, where they're actually building dams. Dams interact with the environment in a way that's not necessarily life, but it collects free energy. Ultimately, we arrive to humans, where humans do something interesting in the creation of complex systems. They not only self-replicate, they not only create ecosystems, but they create abstract concepts to an extreme degree of complexity. And they not only do that, but they create internal micro simulations, which is computers and technology. All of this mathematical trend predicts higher forms of life beyond the capability to create abstract concepts, complex systems. Mathematically and probabilistically through observation, we could conclude the likelihood that life that exists beyond us, that has the capability to create systems of the universe itself, is more likely than not. So that in and of itself is a simple view of modern scientific observation into there is, in most likelihood, a life form of some sort or something beyond life that is a complex system that exists beyond us, that has the capability of not just creating abstract complex systems, but of creating complex systems itself. The singularity. The math points to a singularity of one ultimate power that has the capability to...
And that's what you believe is God.
I believe that it is suggestive of a God. My view of God is probably slightly beyond that. Into when I think of God, I bump into the limits of our ability to comprehend higher dimensions. in visualizing higher dimensions in 2-dimensional planes, because we can't even do it in 3-dimensional planes. And then you come to the ultimate point where we would conclude there is a higher power than us that likely created us, created everything we experience, has the ability to create, destroy, and do whatever it wants, even though in our reality we cannot create or destroy, and we cannot comprehend the true power and true nature of what that is.
Okay. Could you induct then that thing had to be created?
Nope.
Why not?
What do you mean?
Why wouldn't you induct that thing had to be, like, using inductive reasoning? What would you have to base on from actual observation that anything which created anything else was not itself created?
If we go by the standard laws of thermodynamics, that nothing is created or destroyed, only changed.
Yeah, but
so
even if that's the case, the energy which you're destroying or creating, right? God doesn't need to be created. Oh. He always existed, right?
And we were not created in the sense of we manifested. We were created in the sense that the universe was created by God. The structure, the energy, all of it was created. Whether it's finite or not is a determination of God that we don't know.
Well, do you think this thing has consciousness?
And then we organized. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's doing it on purpose?
Absolutely. So
with a purpose?
Presumably. So consciousness, we are in the universe, and we are components of the universe, and what we experience as conscious entities is a component of the universe, which also implies the universe itself, with us within it and within its confines and laws, experiences consciousness either through us, or there is a very, I believe, obvious observation that if simple consciousness, the neurons firing in our brains, which we think is what's generating consciousness, exists, then obviously there is a calculation of a higher power consciousness beyond ours.
Well, what does it want?
I don't know.
Why did it put you here?
There's a couple ideas that I have on that. One is you can describe it as a sorting algorithm, I suppose. Why do heaven and hell exist? Well, the Christian...
You think hell exists too?
Absolutely. But I wouldn't describe it as fire and pits of inferno. I would describe it as, if we look at the universe and we look at the choices we are given, free will, and we take a look at, I would say, trying to learn off Christian or just general religious dogmas, because I do believe that humans and life has a general understanding until it's socialized out of them, or they're broken from it. I do believe people can know God exists, but society today tries to make you erase that from your mind.
Well, this is really strange, though. You think we have free will too?
Yes, absolutely.
You don't think it's predetermined?
There's gradients. Yeah, no, it's not predetermined. There's an element of predetermination in that some things will happen, and then how we function within them is ultimately the function of reality. Now, I don't know that, obviously, but I would say, based on what I've read, what I've seen, what I've experienced, a simple way to describe it is we are here as sort of a test. We are given choices. We are given free will. We're given opportunity. We are given struggles, and we make choices on how we exist within these things. Do you choose to be evil for self-gain, to burn things down and destroy? If life, all life, is functioning towards the creation of complex systems, that it would seem to defy God's will to be a force of entropy. So when you look at Antifa burning things down, destroying that, I describe that as evil. When you look at Democrats exploiting to steal and make gains for themselves, they are empowering a small system at the destruction of a larger system. I would call that evil. If the purpose of a person, or if the function of a person, is to create more complicated systems, i.e. create life, protect life, and expand upon life, that seems to be God's will, as that is what life does. So there's a sort of yin-yang of the universe. I don't believe it's balanced like yin-yang. I believe it's more like the golden ratio spiraling towards negative, towards entropy, with life functioning as negative entropy. And thus, simply put, there is a God. We are here for a reason. We are here to protect, to organize, to create, and develop and expand.
So what if you end up in a situation where you have Aztecs who are cutting the...
You stop them.
Oh, hang on. Cutting the... sacrificing it to their god. Okay? But when they do, they are way more likely to breed. You have now expanded life.
Nope.
Yes.
Yin-yang.